All right, I want to move on to standardization. So standardization being an interesting term, especially prior to coming on, the three of us had a conversation of standardization is important, but it also depends on you and your company and where you're at. And so you both will explain that far more eloquently than I do. So Joe, let's start with you. So what would you say are, in fact, the main obstacles or bottlenecks to establishing a standardized production pipeline for mRNA therapeutics, from across the industry perspective?
So from across the industry perspective, I don't know that it can be standardized across the industry. There are many different ways to make mRNA. Some indications or some uses maybe would require different ways to make it, and that's really up to the company to set to understand the product and set the target product profile to understand what they need to do in order to achieve the grade of mRNA needed. So I don't believe that we can or really should standardize the process, other than to standardize the way of thinking to think about where you're going to end prior to the beginning, right? Plan for the end, plan for the scale, plan for success. There's a lot of things that can be done at small scale that really have no chance at scale. And so thinking about that and avoiding those will help to, I guess, not standardize, but ensure that people are thinking about what they need to ultimately achieve, and not just getting that first screening out to see if there's a hit somewhere.
Yeah, sure. I think, and kind of echoing what I stated at the top, where it's, company dependent. And so, Christian, from your perspective and Nutcracker's perspective, what are the main obstacles in your mind?
I think I'm very similar to what Jess said, right? There's different types of RNA you can produce, right? And I think the manufacturing process is very dependent on the type of RNA you plan to produce. So standardization from that aspect could be very difficult. I think also we see in this space, right, it's relatively young. There's newer technologies coming out every day, better polymerase reagents, different modified UTPs, different capping reagents, different delivery vehicles. So, a lot of the sourcing here is evolving as well. So from a manufacturing perspective, I think it will be very difficult to standardize like industry-wide. I think where there is an opportunity, and that's really how we've approached the topic, is around the testing of your RNA. We've done a lot of benchmarking across different mRNA companies, what kind of assays are they performing, and that's where we've really kind of focused our kind of standardization efforts on, is ensuring that we're consistent, and have the capabilities to execute all the different kind of QC requirements that are out in the industry.
Okay. Joe, talk to us a little bit about, from a raw materials specification and reagents used in mRNA production perspective, how can we address standardization in that regard?
Again, with the increase in quality inputs, there are multiple different vendors that make different, reagents that all can get you to the same place. And there's no way to standardize that. I think it's really up to the company to understand the grade of raw material reagents that they need for their achieved product. You really need to understand your process and understand the implications of the input variability to kind of put up the gates on the process and have the specs that that you can achieve. And having high quality material or inputs often leads to having high quality output or RNA. And I think that is the key really to standardization, is just using quality reagents. I think at the end of the day, there are multiple processes where if you use these quality reagents, that you will get good material out at the end.
Fair, sure. Before we move on to, we have a lot to cover. So before we move on to cold chain storage and logistics, I just wanted to offer Christian the opportunity to provide any more information here before we move on, if need be.
I think the one point I'd add to the comments you made is really kind of ensuring that with that process knowledge of your own process, right, that you have the capabilities to ensure consistency across your raw materials from your vendors. I know for NTX, we're heavily reliant on our suppliers to kind of meet a certain level of quality, and we rely on their C of A's of the materials they provide for us. So ensuring that lot-to-lot variability here is extremely important, but also knowing how sensitive your process is to lot-to-lot variability. I think that's a key aspect as well.